know how trauma causes chronic stress, right? And what it does is trauma ripples through the 5 layers of energy faster than daily stress does. And what does that mean? When your body is under stress or daily stress or goes through a traumatic event, the first thing that responds to that is your nervous system. And what tends to happen here is daily stress, when a regular person goes through daily stress, so R means regular, their nervous system comes back to something called homeostasis pretty fast. So it will go up, and then they'll notice the nervous system will understand that it's an acute stress. So then the stress goes back down, and then this person's back to homeostasis, right? But not with somebody who experienced a trauma in their life. Trauma, what happens with us, because your boy has a tremendous amount of trauma, our nervous system reacts high, very high, and it takes a very long time to come back down to homeostasis. So for a person with a regular nervous system, it depends. If you're in traffic and you get an argument, you're upset, it'll probably take that person within minutes to come back down. Not with people with trauma. People with trauma, your adrenaline, cortisol, and insulin levels respond a lot higher and faster. And I will bring you through more of that. I call it the trifecta effect. I'll bring you through that. So what happens here is trauma becomes subconscious very fast versus daily stress. It will have to be over and over and over and over again. Think about just sitting in your house and hearing the kitchen sink water drip, drip, drip. Trauma's like, pow, your whole nervous system, oh. After a while, the drip, 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 you're gonna get annoyed, but trauma's like that big boom. So as we mentioned, both of them, daily stress and trauma, go through the nervous system. But for those that have trauma, what happens with us is that our nervous system becomes something I call a sensitive nervous system. The more you understand your nervous system, the more you understand the effects that having a nervous system that's sensitive affects you big time. And I'll bring you through on how that's the case. So this would be the first layer of energy that's affected by trauma. The second layer is going to be the adrenals and organs and glands. And the main one I like to focus on the most is going to be the adrenal glands and the digestive system. Now, if you look up the sympathetic, you have something called the autonomic nervous system, and you look up the sympathetic nervous system and then the parasympathetic nervous system, what we'll notice is that the sympathetic is known to fight or flight, and then the parasympathetic is known to rest and digest. But what tends to happen here is those that have trauma are going to be stuck here in the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is responsible to produce a hormone called cortisol, which is your stress hormone. But adrenaline is going to be high as well. And adrenaline will keep you alert, and adrenaline basically numbs your body. So you ever have a lot of adrenaline doing something, you bang your knee and you don't feel it, but maybe the next day or the day after you lay down and you're like, yo, my knee hurts. Why do I have this bruise? Well, usually because your stress hormones are very high. Well, with someone with a sensitive nervous system that is created from trauma, our adrenaline levels are usually higher than a normal person's adrenaline, even during a normal day. In fact, if you look up studies, they show, I had to look up 50 plus studies on this information to put it into a book that's going to be traditionally published. The publishing house has 5 people that go through the editing process that look for any misinformation because it puts the publisher at risk. And I had to find at least 50 different studies to show how cortisol is known to be higher in those that experience some type of trauma in their life. But you'll learn just in a second that cortisol can't work by itself. It brings 2 buddies along with it that nobody really talks about one of them, which then gives you weight problems, skin problems, digestive issues, fatigue, thyroid problems. Nobody talks about that one. And that's the one I'm trying to bring to light with this book. Okay, so what happens here is that the sympathetic nervous system is supported to help, and it's actually needed for survival. It helps us fight something or run away as fast as we can or flight, but it also can make one be in a freeze mode. It can make us feel stuck and frozen. But what tends to happen here is it also shifts the way the organs and glands work, right? So we're on the organs and glands here, second layer of energy. So when the sympathetic nervous system's high, you'll notice that you'll have a drier mouth, eyes will be dry, digestion slows down and turns off. You'll notice that your muscular system will be really tight. You'll notice that controlling your urine or your bowels you're gonna have problems. So it's a chain reaction, because when the body is on the fight or flight, the body takes the blood flow and pushes it towards the main muscles and the heart to help you fight or flight. Therefore, other organs and glands are not getting the support with blood flow, and the support with blood flow creates emotions, energy and motion to support those organs to be able to have control. So every time there is any inflammation or not enough blood flow, it can leave it can give you the inability to control the muscles around there and have full control of the organs around there. But the heart, lungs, hypothalamus, adrenals, those organs and glands are going to be on overdrive. So that's the second layer of energy. The third layer of energy, we're going to notice that the muscular system is going to get really tight because the body's preparing for fight or flight. Now, what tends to happen here is if you add in the organ and gland, you add in the nervous system, and then you add into the muscular system, the first three layers of energy, you can find a very common problem with someone that's struggling with digestive issues here. And the reason why they start struggling with digestive issues is because high levels of stress, what you'll learn in a second, will equal high levels of blood sugar. But you'll notice a person having issues with fungal infection. So usually the first sign you see with somebody struggling with trauma is going to be, as it's affecting their daily life, fatigue is always the first sign. Secondly, I find a fungal infection being the second. And most people are blown away. I'm like, fungal infection? How's it a fungal infection? Well, it's a fungal infection for the simple fact that a fungal infection has control of, it usually responds when the body's immune system is suppressed. So the higher your cortisol levels are, the lower your immune system is going to be able to really function, right? So the more stressed the body is, the more you deplete your immunity. But secondly, you're going to be, when a person is under a lot of fight or flight, you need to eat. The need to eat more sugar is going to be there. So you're going to crave sugar and salt. Those are going to be two big things, especially when a person has a body that's under a lot of stress, fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, because the organs and glands require sugar and salt. So one will overeat sugar and salt and notice that they can't stop craving these things and overeating. And if you combine all these things, usually a fungal infection would be one of the first things that we'll see. A fungal infection will arrive in your life a couple ways. I want to explain this. A fungal infection can look like digestive issues. Eating, if I give you a banana, do you get tired? If I give you carbohydrates, do you get tired? If I give you fruits, do you start having gas? Do you start farting? I'm not trying to be funny, I'm being serious. Do you have skin issues? Do you have little bumps that are popping up? If I give you a lollipop, do you start scratching your skin and start realizing that your arm's itching and your leg is itching? A fungal infection will make you crave carbohydrates, especially sugar, right before bed. You can eat the healthiest meal in the world, but you can be craving carbohydrates and not understanding why. A fungal infection, their circadian rhythm is opposite of ours. So our midnight is a fungi, it's their midday. Our midday is their midnight. So at night, they can manipulate you to want to eat sugar. And this is not to scare you. I went to the Czech Institute and had to study this for 4 years, everything about fungal infections. A fungal infection, fungus is not bad. It's a part of the microbiome. It's a part of our digestive tract and our skin. But it's supposed to be a balance of 85% good bugs, 15% bad. But when one's under a lot of stress from trauma and craves a lot of sugar and is unaware that their nervous system is sensitive, so they are going to be extra sensitive when they eat junk food, too much coffee, not sleeping, being in a big room of a lot of people or crowds or events, their nervous system is too sensitive for this. So what happens is the body gets under more stress, utilizes more stress hormone, and utilizes the glands of the adrenal glands to be utilized more during this process. And the adrenal glands crave salt. And a lot of people have the misconception of thinking that their cravings for sugar is for sugar, when it's really for salt first and then sugar, because the body uses a lot of sugar during fight or flight. So that being said, what we start to see is fungal infections are very common, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about, because your boy had a crazy fungal infection till I was about like 22, 23 years old. And I can still easily flare up my fungal infection over time. And it's not, like I said, you have to manage it. People want to take an oil of oregano and do all these things to try to kill off a fungal infection. The truth is, a fungal infection is there because it is compensating for the sugar or the amount of stress that you can't control. Okay. So if you look at any major disease, most diseases, people with a side effect would have a fungal infection, but you're going to learn why more in about a second. I'm going to show you something that nobody probably showed you before about how all this connects with when it comes down to a fungal infection, weight gain, metabolic syndromes, PCOS, obesity, belly fat, non-alcoholic fatty liver. Yeah, I'm going to share that with you. Okay, so this we can notice someone having bloating, gas, food allergy, or inflammation. So remember, if you're under a lot of stress, it's almost impossible to be able to digest and assimilate your food because of the simple fact that your digestive system is going to be turned off because the blood flow that you utilize to create peristalsis, the gastric acid from the stomach that's producing acidity to break down protein, all of that's going to be inhibited. It's going to be turned off because the digestive tract is associated with rest and digest, the parasympathetic nervous system. But your sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive because you have a sensitive nervous system from trauma. Okay. Now, with all of these combined, every organ and gland in your body connects and communicates with the spine, and the spine has something called nerve channels that come out of it. So each section of your body will learn that will connect to a particular part of your core muscle. So on the bottom pelvic floor here, we can have the internal obliques that come in here, but the big one I mentioned in the video that I posted earlier is the transverse abdominis. It's a tight belt-like muscle that protects you when you are twisting, when you bend over. But what happens here is that if there's inflammation here, this signals through the nerve channels that communicate with the muscle nearest to it as pain. So the muscle doesn't understand inflammation. The muscle, that's not the language of the muscle. The muscle understands pain. So what starts to happen here is, since this inflammation is occurring in the digestive tract or any organ in your body, but we're talking about the digestive tract right now, what tends to happen is the inflammation in the digestive tract will signal pain to the muscle. So what happens here is the body will stop sending blood flow over here to the muscle and would double down and send blood flow to the organ and gland, because your organ and gland is more important than the muscle. So there's a quote that we learned in school. The heart will always sacrifice the body will always sacrifice the arm, your left arm, for your heart any day. It will pick the heart over a muscle any day. So if you go look up, if you want to learn more about this and see the connections, just sit and think about, you ever know somebody had a heart attack? What tends to happen? Their jaw can either lock or their left arm goes numb. Why? Because it's the same neurotic loop that connects the jaw, the heart, the left chest, the shoulder, elbow, wrist. They all work together. So if there's inflammation or there's a heart attack, the nerves that communicate with the muscle nearest to it are going to also be affected, which is the arm, the jaw, the shoulder. Okay, so as we go up here, if a person is having this problem here, right, with inflammation and having problem because their sensitive nervous system is turning off their digestive tract, then we can run into something called an anterior pelvic tilt. So since the core muscles are not working, the abdominals are going to be weak, and then we can find the pelvis start tilting forward into something we call the anterior pelvic tilt. The biggest problem that this causes that I see people is that they think that their hamstrings are too tight, so they assist of trying to continuously stretch out the hamstrings. But the truth is that their hamstrings are too weak, because the pelvis being pulled forward pulls the hamstring up, that makes the hamstring feel tight. But as they continue to try to stretch out the hamstrings, they'll run into issues with the hamstrings, their calf, their feet, etc. So this will cause a lot more problems. So the number one thing is, if this is the posture that you find yourself in, it's very important that we actually find what's turning off your core muscles. Are your core muscles actually activating or not? Right? And if they are, then we have to do the opposite. We have to strengthen the hamstrings, loosen up the quads, loosen up the tight hip flexors, especially the iliac psoas muscle, which is a deep hip flexor. And then we have to strengthen up your glute muscles, okay? All right, so now as we go through this, the last stage, like I mentioned earlier, so we know that the fourth layer of energy is going to be the muscular system. Your quads are going to be really tight. Your hip flexors are going to be tight. But the last stage, my friend, we're going to go a little deep on this one. You ready for this one? And then if anybody has any questions, throw them in here. I can answer anything that you have. We have trauma gets stored into the subconscious mind right away. How many of you know what the subconscious mind is? Let's see if any of you know what the subconscious mind is. And if you're watching this on replay, put it down in the comments. Now, these replays will only be available to those that are a member. So if you're here with your boy and you want to catch this for the free, for the low, stick around. How many of you know what the subconscious mind is? Let's see if anybody's even you guys nervous to participate here? Let's see what you got. Let's see. That's a vibe right there. Like this one right too. All right, I'll wait around to see if anybody knew what the subconscious mind is, so I could be on I'm in my flow. TFL. Oh, so Frankie, what up, Frankie? Thank you for joining the membership. I appreciate you. I saw that the other day. I have a tight TFL and it hurts when I do SMR. Okay, Frankie, I'm going to answer your question at the end. I got you. Stick around. I'm going to walk you through that. I'll bring you through something. Okay, so what happens here is that when it becomes subconscious, this means that the nervous system being in fight or flight is going to be a problem. That means the organs and glands, like your digestive tract, is going to happen every day. It's going to be a problem for you every day. That means the muscular system overreacting in the way of giving you tight hips, low back problems, issues with your knees. That's going to be a problem every day. And that also means that your emotions, you're going to be struggling big time with your emotions. All of this is going to be subconscious. Why would you struggle with your emotions? Well, what tends to happen is I find a person struggles with a 50-50 mindset. And the 50-50 mindset is someone who has issues when it comes down to one day they feel motivated to take on the world, but the next day they feel down again. They feel like they can't do it. They have doubt. They have worry. They have all these, these things that pop up. A 50-50 mindset occurs that one part of you is ready to go on your transformation, but the other party is still struggling with bad habits or struggling with doubt and fear. And you'll notice that this 50-50 mindset not going in your favor, let's just say this is the negative aspect of it, will always increase anytime you're not taking care of your mind with nutrition, moving your body, being around positive environments with positive people, and not actually being clear on what you want in life. And that's what tends to happen with this. So anytime a body's under a lot of stress, if you like it or not, your body's automatically going to go into this survival mode. Why is that? Well, you can't beat the biological system, right? We can't finesse this part of the body. When there's a lot of stress, the body from trauma, right? So stress is going to be your number one enemy, not your enemy, but you're going to be very sensitive to it. You're going to be producing a lot of it because the trauma will cause a lot of stress, high levels of stress, because you have a sensitive nervous system. What this does is this part of the brain has a great communication with the sympathetic nervous system. The emotional and intellectual, these two usually do a good job of bridging the gap of the parasympathetic nervous system. So scientifically, the more stressed that you are, the more that the body's going to be hyper focused on safety. What does safety look like today? Having a job, having money in your account, feeling safe in your environment, at home. Are you someone that locks the door 3-4 times after locking the door, like your car? Are you someone that keeps locking the door of the house? These things are, very normal to go through after experiencing trauma. And a lot of it's because your brain's going to be wired to be looking for safety and security at all times. Substance, how many of you that had trauma struggle with some type of addiction or bad habit of overeating or smoking or drinking or whatever it may be? Everybody's different, right? So it's not judging, but it's understanding that the part of the brain after it goes through safety and security and feels safe and secure, the body now, the brain, dopamine, this is norepinephrine up here. The more norepinephrine you use, which is the neurotransmitter that keeps you alert and responsive, the more dopamine it's going to need to recharge. The more norepinephrine, the more sugar you used. The more when it's done, the more glycogen, which is a part of stored sugar in your body, is not going to be as available. The more the body is going to need sugar to produce more glycogen, stored sugar. And then it depends on what stage you're at with stress when it comes down to sex and procreation. I often find that the more stress over time, the more burnt out a person is, the more their sex drive is going to be depleted, because your body cortisol competes with your reproductive hormones. So the more stress that a person has, the more that their body's going to require more B5 and cholesterol for the body to be supported by cortisol. But progesterone comes over and steals that nutrition away from progesterone, which is your mother hormone that feeds DHEA, testosterone, DHEA, testosterone, and estrogen, testosterone, and DHEA. So what happens here is called cortisol steal occurs. And what happens here is that a person now is left with low levels of reproductive hormones being supported by nutrition, especially B5 and cholesterol, because progesterone is coming over, stealing it to feed cortisol, because cortisol is needed for fight or flight. So one of the most simplest ways I explain this to clients is, imagine that the more stress that you are, the less the nervous system and the psyche cares about reproducing, because the environment's not safe to bring a child into. To keep it so simple, because sometimes too much science is too much science. There's way too much science sometimes. Okay. So now you're starting to see trauma is not just something that, people are going around and lying about how trauma affected their life. No, this thing is real. And the reason why I got into this is because I was extremely traumatized as a kid. To the point where, like I mentioned earlier, when I was born, I was actually born on heroin, right? My mom is a white woman. My father's a black man. I was born on heroin to the part where I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital till I was about, a few months old. I was in ICU and I was having seizures every day because of the drugs that they were bringing me through, and it was really affecting my body. But when I got out of, when it's time to pick me up, my dad was on the streets. He was a drug dealer. My mother was a drug addict, and nobody was available to come pick me up. So my white grandmother came and picked me up. And then it was known that, not everybody was happy that mom had a baby with a black man. And these are things that I didn't talk about growing up, or these are things that we kept on a low because I didn't want to embarrass certain parts of my family, because I'm forgiving and I'm loving. But I started noticing there was a lot of problems I was dealing with because there was a lot of things that weren't being spoken about. Right? There was a lot of things that I wasn't telling people. There was a lot of things that I was scared to say. But growing up, I had weight issues, digestive issues, fungal infections, ADHD, skin problems, anger problems, rheumatoid. I got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and I'm not sure if you can see, but I got white hair. It's kind of blended into my little afro right now, my little curly hair. But I have vitiligo. My skin started to turn white. And nobody can understand what the root cause is to vitiligo. But what I've learned is that vitiligo is a side effect of high levels of cortisol. It's it messes with the pigmentation. I have celiac disease. So every time you turn around, you're getting diagnosed with something. ADHD, celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis. Like, yo, what is not, tell me something good about myself. So when I was growing up, I was going to all these doctors, and I was on Section 8 and welfare and Medicaid. So, my mom was barely taking me to doctors and stuff. When I finally got to see them, I would throw thousands of questions like, what's wrong with me? How's this, why am I like this? And they would always say, oh, genetics. And I'm like, well, I sweat a lot. Like, my underarms sweat, and I have to change my t-shirt in school. It's embarrassing. Oh, genetics. And I was like, something got to be off. So from that day, I just really started dedicating my life to trying to study this stuff and understand myself. So a lot of it took place with philosophy first, of understanding why did my friends do what they did on the streets, and I was losing my whole family. My sister ended up, killing my niece, who was 6 months. So I lost my whole family. My sister had 2 kids. I used to watch these 2 kids all the time, my 2 nephews. My sister took the life of my niece. My nephews went to the state of New Jersey. My brother went to prison 2 days later for beating up the cameraman who kept on banging on the door and stuff like that. And my mother was clean for those 3 to 4 years. And that was the day she really lost it. And she's never been the same since that. So I lost my family at 11 years old, and I was trying to figure this stuff out. I was going home every day. There was no hot water. There was no heat, and I was scared, to be real with you. But I had a little brother. I had 2 little brothers. And I was like, yo, if I show them I'm scared, then they're going to be scared. So I used to make up lies and used to use my imagination to keep them motivated. Like, oh, God is testing us and the universe does this. And it was all things just to, because if they cried and they got scared, then it made me more scared. So I had to do these things. But it was one day I just sat down with a notebook, literally a notebook, like just like this. And I keep these notebooks around because it brings back these memories. I sat down with a notebook and I said, how do I escape Jersey City? How do I escape the trauma? How do I overcome this? And I just wrote out a dream. You know, that dream led me to be the first Division I football player in school history 7 years later. And then when I went to college, they're like, what do you want to study? You're good at talking. You should be in communication or sports management. And I said, I want to be in movement science. I came to this college, Delaware State University, on a full Division I scholarship to study movement science. His name was Eric Hart. He said, why would you want to study movement science? I said, I want to study movement science because I got to figure out what's wrong with me. My body, my mind, I'm broken. I need to figure this out. And that's a conception that we can think when you go through trauma. You think that you're broken. You're not broken, my friend. In fact, you're actually special. I'm not saying that just to say it. I can actually throw a fact at you right now. How many of you are the first one in their family to do something that nobody has ever done? Are you the first one to go to high school? Are you the first one to go to college? Because what I happen to find is that usually when people have trauma, there's a deeper connection that a lot of people don't, I'm not sure if a lot of us are aware of. So what I did is I threw that in the book. As I'm writing the book, the publisher's looking at me like, you sure about this? I'm like, I'm very sure. People with trauma are actually special because their nervous system being hypersensitive, a sensitive nervous system, outside of bringing the side effects, it actually over triggers the right brain. The right brain is a part of the brain that is responsible for intuition. It's responsible for creativity. It's responsible for imagination. So when you walk in a room, you're wired differently. You can feel good energy or bad energies in that room. You know if it's a good vibe or not. Your intuition is on the next level. So you'll feel something, and that's not to be woo-woo with you. That's a fact. Go study it. But the left brain is going to be deactivated because the right brain is going to be the main priority for us because of the trauma. So that's something, our weaknesses come with organization and being analytical, being organized all the time, and expressing on how we truly feel without sounding too mad or too angry or overwhelming people. So I went to school, studied this movement science, got a strength and conditioning, anatomy, physiology, physical therapy, and nutrition. And then after graduating, I dedicated my life to saving up all my money, working, running around New York City, training people for free for $20. And I saved up every dollar to go to the Chek Institute to study under a man named Paul Chek, who I thought was the smartest human being. I still think is one of the smartest human beings I've ever met in my life. But my dream was just to get certified under him. And fast forward years later, I got his highest certification, and he's actually my personal mentor. He signed off on my book. He interviewed me. He wanted to know more about my story. It was pretty cool to see the dreams come true. But this is not all of, I'm trying to show you that I was the first one to do these things. But as you're sitting here listening to me, there's two things I want you to get from this. Number one, I'm not some guy that just started Googling this and trying to make content. No, this is personal to me. I had to figure, this is me. And secondly, I made the impossible possible. And I'm pretty sure you made the impossible possible, but your perspective probably isn't on that so much because a lot of the times we're being told what we're not doing rather than what we are doing, especially if you're the first one in your family to do things. And you'll be something I call a 1%er. You had a 1% chance of doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. Kate says, hello, Kate. How's everybody doing? We're just doing a nice little presentation here. I wanted to put something together. I miss doing my lives on TikTok. For those that don't know, I was banned on TikTok. I guess this information is too much for some platforms, but I had 300,000 followers. I used to do lives at 300-400 people a day. So I have to start all over, and I have no problem. I started off with the beautiful people I have here, and these lives will be available as far as recording for members. I can't, it won't work out well if I just keep that up public because the algorithm YouTube is very picky. It would throw everything off and stop me from growing. So I had to make it under either unlisted or set it for members. And I just created a thing for members for all these recordings here. All right, let's get back to work, baby. So now that we understand that the reptilian brain is primarily focused on safety and security, and it does not care, no offense, it just, at the moment, it doesn't care about love and affection. So the more stressed that you are, and if you're in a relationship, or if your partner has a sensitive nervous system and has trauma, it may feel like they're absent, or people may say you're absent, but the truth is that biologically, your psyche's not worried about loving and affection. Your psyche's going to be stressing about safety and security. So maybe getting back to that email, or maybe how can you make more money, and it's not about being money hungry. Money is the thing that keeps us safe. And in today's economy, being so stressed, we have a sensitive nervous system. We feel that more. It affects us more. And if you're first generation, you're going to be affected more because you can't call mommy and daddy for money. You are the one that everybody's counting on. So it's a lot more challenging. It's a lot more personal. It's not easy just to lay down and be cuddly. And then last but not least, the intellectual part of the brain, we noticed that we'll do the same thing tomorrow that we did yesterday that was stressful or no longer works for us. But it's hard to get into the intellectual part of the brain. This is called the neocortex, because the body is being driven to focus on the reptilian part of the brain. So it's not that you have these ideas, you know what to do, but you won't do it, or you're not able to do it because everything is being pulled right back into everything has to be safe and secure first. So this can leave us thinking that we're procrastinators, or it can leave us with overthinking, but it's not your fault. It's not something that, oh, you're an overthinker. No, the truth is that you just struggle with being able to tap into the neocortex, not because you don't choose to, because the body psyche it's on safety. Your sensitive nervous system, high levels of cortisol, adrenaline is making the psyche think that the environment's not safe, and it wants to get safety and security first. Okay. So that's just like a nice little thing as I go through. I have a lot more things here. I know we may have some questions, and some questions I'll be able to dive more into specific things about how trauma can get stored in the body. But first, I know Frankie had a question about hip pain, and hip pain is going to be something that's going to be very common for us, because as you can see, a lot of stress in the body, and I'm sorry for those that just joined, but a lot of people who have a lot of stress, what happens is the adrenals produce a lot of cortisol. Cortisol turns on the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Therefore, fight or flight, if you look up the sympathetic nervous system on a diagram, you'll see that the sympathetic nervous system turns off digestion. Therefore, it leaves us inflamed with the digestive tract, and the digestive tract communicates to nerve channels that communicate with a muscle nearest to it. And the muscle nearest to it happens to be your core, and your core receives the signal as pain. So it inhibits the muscle from working. The blood flow that will usually go to the core is being sacrificed to go help with the inflammation of an organ or a gland. The body will always pick an organ and gland over a muscle any day. It's more important, leaving you bloated. Now, this bloating will bring you to something we call an anterior pelvic tilt. Let me just erase this so you can have more clarity what that looks like, because this is going to explain the hip pain. This anterior pelvic tilt comes from the core muscles not being activated, right? The core muscles are responsible to stabilize your pelvis. It helps with that. But if you're bloated, what happens here is that the hip flexors, so you have the iliac psoas muscle, which is a deep hip flexor that's right here. This bad boy goes under here. And then your quad muscles get tight. So if you take your hand or take your elbow and push your elbow into your quad muscle is a thigh. Just kind of gently, move it around there. You may feel a lot of tension there because that's usually the muscle that's going to be really tight. Well, deep down inside, Frankie, there's a little muscle here called the TFL. I'm going to color it in for you. And this TFL is a muscle that ends up compensating for a weak gluteus medius. Okay, so you have three parts to the glute, and I'm going to bring you through that. So let's go over here. A person that has a weak gluteus medius, so we all have this little muscle up here called the gluteus medius, which is responsible to be helping stabilize the pelvis when you walk or you run. So as you're on your right foot, this gluteus medius, its job is to stabilize this pelvis. But what happens is when the hip flexors get really tight, the butt muscles end up getting really weak. we'll notice that this gluteus medius will be weak. And instead of it stabilizing your pelvis when you walk on that leg, you're going to notice this tilt that comes up. So Frankie, the first thing I would ask you is that on the side that the the TFL muscle is tight, I want you to see if the muscle right here, which is called the QL muscle, it's a lower back muscle, see if that gives you problems, okay? The second thing I would be looking at is to see if I were to do an analysis on your body, I would notice that the shoulder here is going to be curved down compared to the shoulder up here. Don't mind this. This doesn't look like shoulders, but your boy's not the best artist, but I'll try. Your shoulder is going to be dipping down like this. Okay. So if you look in the mirror, see if the side that let's just say the right TFL muscle is tight. Let's just say that. We are going to know the right QL muscle here is going to be tight. And then this will pull down the rib cage. So your external obliques are going to be really tight on that side, but your shoulder's going to drop. So see if that makes sense for you, Frankie. Anybody else has any other questions? I want to answer some Q&A. I got my little whiteboard here that I can share with you. Got some vibes going on. I just learned on how to play music on this thing. Let's see if we have any other questions. So Frankie, the goal is to strengthen this gluteus medius here. That's going to be a number one goal. I have a video. If you go on the channel after I'm done, go on the channel and look up Crooked Body. It's called Crooked Body. Go through the videos. Even if I only made it available for the members, you're a member, so you'll be able to get that video. I explain this and I show you the exercises to do after. It's an exercise you can do at home. Okay, any stretches or somatic workouts we can do to release stored trauma? Absolutely, Kate. 100%. 100%. Absolutely. Let's break that down. Good question. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is let's look at this diagram I have here. Okay, I have two diagrams here. I'm going to bring you through both. If we look at trauma and stored trauma and how to release it, what we're going to notice is that the number one primary muscle that needs to be released, it is going to be the quads. The quads and the iliac psoas. So if you go to Amazon, which I'm making a video about this, how to release the trauma from the body, there's a thing called the psoas release. And go get one of them. It's going to be the best investment you make. Go get the psoas release, and you can get on Amazon and watch videos on how to do it. If you get it before I make my video, where you want to gently do it and you want to gently lean it, you're going to lay on top of it. It's going to release those deep hip flexors called the iliac psoas muscle that I brought up in the video I made today. And I can go back here. It's these little sneaky little muscles under here. They're strong. They're deep hip flexors. And these get really tight. This is what usually pulls the spine forward and makes the back curve. Okay, that's first thing. So this muscle right here is going to be the first muscle that responds when fight or flight, because it pulls the body to fight or run. So many people don't know that. And the iliac psoas muscle causes a kinetic chain reaction that therefore causes, since the body's being forward, you're going to be walking as if you're walking forward. So we can find the calf muscles be really tight, because you're going to put a lot more pressure on the calf muscles, because the pelvis being pulled forward and tilted forward pulls you to walk as if you're going to fall forward. So you'll be walking more on your toes than actually getting full range of motion through your gait, which is your posture when you walk and you run. So your gait, what we notice is being more on the toes, you're going to be activating the Achilles and calf muscles a lot more. And the quad muscles are going to be the ones that are going to be helping you stop in acceleration, especially when you sit down too. They're going to get extra tight. So the first decision, if you want to release trauma, is going to be the iliac psoas muscle. And you're going to have to learn how to breathe, because we'll learn that the more trauma a person has, the more tight their abdominal wall is going to be. It can be bloated, but it can still hold a lot of tension. So I'll do an exercise with you right now. Glad I found you live. Norma, what is going on? Norma came to my workshop in LA. I remember names, Norma. See, I remember you. So put your hand on your belly. Okay, let me put this iPad up, and then we'll go back to the whiteboard here. But I want to walk you through an exercise really quick. And a lot of you are going to be like, oh, wow, that's crazy. So what we're going to do here is you're going to put your hand on your belly, okay? And inhale through your nose. And then exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Now, tell me what happened to your hand. There's two things that you're going to see. Number one, did your hand expand out? Or did your shoulders go up first like this and then your hand came out a little bit? So did you look like this? Or was it? Usually you'll find a lot of people who are stuck in fight or flight. Remember, fight or flight increases heart rate and breathing. Therefore, the upper abdominals. So if we lean back here, these muscles right below the rib cage are going to be really tight, because since your body's being pulled to go on fight or flight from the iliac psoas muscle, you're kind of like doing a crunch as you stand, which then going to pull your shoulders forward. See, everything just reacts. Therefore, a person's not going to be breathing through their pelvic floor. So we can find outside of the calves being tight because your pelvis is being pulled that way, your calves and Achilles are going to be tight because you're not getting enough oxygen throughout your muscular system. So the more shallow your breath, the less oxygen reaches the hands and the feet. So do you have cold hands and feet throughout the day? Because there may not be enough blood flow getting there, right? And that's not to add in the fact that thyroid problems coming from adrenal issues can be causing that as well. Or blood sugar can start damaging the nerves at the furthest away from the body. Okay. Good question. I hope that helped. So the stretches, hip flexor stretch, get that psoas release. It's called the psoas release. Like I said, I'll be making a whole video to demonstrate everything and walk you through it. Foam roll the quads and stretch out the calves. Don't do too much because they can be overwhelming. I can give you a lot more, but I don't want to overwhelm you here. There was a question that I had earlier from Frankie that I want to answer. Okay, so I answered that already. Okay, I'll keep going. You had, okay. All right, anybody else got any other questions? We can go back to the whiteboard, baby. You see, I just popped up there. Look, I just disappear on you. Come right back. Gotta have some fun with this stuff. All right. Here's a deep one for the ladies here. And now men can go through this too, but this is a big problem. Now, Kate, I do want to mention this really quick. Kate, if you look on your side, look in the mirror and look from the side. Let's get rid of this, baby. I hope you create a Discord server. Oh, thank you, Kate. Well, actually, I have we have a membership with over 100 people in it. I just closed it down for the last year because I was working on my book. And I was really just focused. I wanted to give value to the, I didn't want to miss out on not giving value. But I just got out of the membership to come on here to say hello to you. So I do have a private membership. I will be making available. So we have a community board. I do lives on there. I do Q&A on there. It's a beautiful community. I love my community. All right. So, okay, if we look from the side, is this a problem that you have, or anybody in this chat? Do you notice that this is a problem? I want to make sure that I make this clear, because if you're someone that does have issues with tight hip flexors or tight hips or posture problems, you want to release trauma, we have to be careful if you have this. You do not do what I just said if you have this problem. Okay? Anybody? Going once, going twice? Kate said I'll join that. Well, thank you, Kate. That's very nice of you. If you like this information, your boy's just getting started. I got so much more. I promise you that. Okay. All right, Kate. So if you have this, we got to be careful. This is why it's important to have a full assessment with either a Czech practitioner or a specialist. So for those who don't know, I am a nutritionist. I am a Czech practitioner, which is a holistic practitioner. For 5 years, I had to study to get 3 levels of licenses. I'm an integrative health practitioner. I went to school for Bachelor of Science and Movement Science for physical therapy, nutrition, and strength and conditioning. And I'm also a behavior specialist at the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I don't ever talk about these things in my videos because I feel like it wastes too much time. But I just wanted to say that this stuff here it takes a deep practitioner to understand this information of how to go about this with a client. And I'm going to give you this information right now. I'm going to break it down to be simple. So if you notice this, Kate, or and Norma, if you notice that from the side, your butt cheeks squeeze, okay? This will be something I call heart bottom syndrome. At the Czech Institute, we learn that this is very different than a person who has an anterior pelvic tilt. Usually, Kate, I'm about to hit you with some balls here, you and Norma. Usually, a lot of this is coming from the reproductive system being inflamed. And if you watched my video earlier, this is where we can get deep and connect a lot of science through Eastern medicine, but something I call the 5 layers of energy. So if this section of your body is known to be, actually, let's color this to make it even more relatable here. If this section of the body is known to be for your reproductive system, and if we go through the 5 layers of energy, what can be a connection here? Well, we know that there's going to be, we know there's going to be, if this is the organ and gland, that means the nervous system here communicates with the organ and gland, right? So we have to see if Kate and also Norma, is there trauma from childhood or your experience? Remember, the nervous system, creating a sensitive nervous system, is rooted from trauma. So then that means the organ and gland here is going to be affected. Now we have to see, we'll go a little deeper in a minute, the muscular system. So if there's inflammation here in the organ and gland, that means the muscle nearest to it, which happens to be your deep abdominal wall, will be inhibited. Just like how I just showed you here on how inflammation here in any organ and gland will cause inflammation with the muscle nearest to it. So for you, if there's inflammation or any problem with the reproductive system, your communication will come here and communicate more bloat in the lower abdominal. Okay? It's very different because, unfortunately, Kate and Norma and anybody else who's watching this who can relate, that deep hip flexor, that iliac psoas muscle that I told you that people struggle with, that's going to be affected. So that's not even going to be able to activate. So your hip flexors can't compensate for you. So what compensates? The butt cheeks. The butt cheek squeeze. And it creates like a heart. The longer a person has this, the more, if I were to do a full analysis on them, their feet are going to be turned out. The reason why is because the feet turn out as a kickstand, because if a person has no control of their deep abdominal wall, they can easily fall forward. So the body's kinetic chain and psyche create the feet to kind of turn out, or supinate. So this is pronation, this is supination. Okay, so when the knee comes in, that's internal rotation. When the knee's turned out, that's called external rotation. The worse this is, the more the foot's going to be kicked out and the knee's going to be pointing out in external rotation. So as we go through this, the muscular system, we know now, is going to be inflamed. Why? Because the organ and gland is going to have problems. Why? Because the nervous system. But why did it happen here, not at like the chest muscle and things like that? And this was something that I wanted to figure out, but I noticed a pattern. I noticed a pattern from doing thousands of videos on TikTok to doing hundreds of live videos with millions of people over time. It was millions of people who watched these lives, and to going around the country doing workshops in person with people. And of course, being a coach. I've been doing this for not a long time, but this is year 8 of me being a coach, which is insane to me. But I was a celebrity coach. I worked with the richest people, the most famous people, but I worked with mothers and people trying to come out the ghetto too. And I noticed the same pattern in all of them. Kate, hope you don't, and Norma, hope you don't mind me calling you out here. I would immediately look for trauma subconsciously that came from 8 to 14 years old. you will be something I consider a zone 2 client. A zone 2 client is someone who's very hard on themselves. A zone 2 client is someone who has so much creativity. They're full of creativity. These people are the most creative people you ever meet in your life. A zone 2 person is someone who puts everyone else in front of themselves. They're the most loyal people I've ever come across. If you can get a zone 2 client to trust you, you got one of the most loyal people on your side. But when you cross a zone 2, it's a wrap for you. It's as if you never existed in their life. But these people can come off very strong, right? Sarcastic or tough. But the truth is that they have to put this front on because they've been emotionally, physically, or sexually abused in their life. And they're doing everything they have to do to be able to protect themselves. And when I notice if it's a woman, I have to be, I can't be too much of an authority, which I'm not naturally. But you can't be too much of an authority. You can't raise your voice. You can't say certain things because usually I find the wounds emotionally, which is the 4th layer of energy before subconscious, is going to be, men can be a trigger, especially men that are, too much of an authority, too controlling, etc. But I always find these clients always have relationships or past relationships with a narcissist all the time. So what I would say here is this can be a connection. And I know it can sound funny and crazy, but let's look at it like this. Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's say this emotion, any issues that came down from 8 to 14, also having a father that is an alcoholic is something that I find too. But let's just say from 8 to 14, there was a trauma. Well, let's say if there wasn't a trauma there, but the trauma took place with the reproductive system. If there's a trauma here with the nervous system, that means subconsciously, without you thinking, you can notice a person, especially holding your pee or holding their poop, or if they grew up in a household that was very strict about religion and made you feel guilty about your sexuality, anything that made you feel like you had to suppress the organ and gland that is associated with this area of your body, you communicate that. All these little channels here is the nerves. The nerves subconsciously communicate that to the muscles that then communicates that with the organ and gland. Or which one came first, the chicken or the egg? The nervous system of the trauma of being sexually abused gave you basically, I'm not going to call it blockage. The nerves around your reproductive area and your organs and glands took that trauma, took place and created major imbalance with the nerves and muscles around you. So what you'll find is if a person's been traumatized in that area, if you touch their quads, if they're getting a massage, they'll get really uncomfortable. Subconsciously, they may tense up too, because that touch from the nervous system being perceived around that area of the muscles are associated with the gland or the reproductive system that was affected from the trauma subconsciously. So you can find it going back and forth. You have to find the chicken and the egg. And obviously, these aren't questions you ask somebody when you first meet them, but there is tendencies and rhythms and patterns I find in this particular person. They love subconsciously red. And that's not to say all of them. All my clients who are zone 2. But if I go to a workshop and I see someone with red dress, red lipstick, red hair, red nails, I know I have a zone 2 client. But it will confirm if this person is sitting in a corner by themselves or isolated. Because remember, they don't trust people. They're most loving and loyal people you meet in your life until you cross them. But you have to earn their trust. All right. I survived and done a lot of shadow work for childhood trauma. So now I'm focused on embodiment. My husband and I are looking forward to your book. We got ourselves some organic food. Oh, wow. Damn, Kate. Shout out to you. Thank you. Dad passed when I was 3. Okay. And I was parented by my mom. Okay. There you go. So, Kate, you're a survivor. And look at you now. Look at all of us. Talking about trauma. We could be watching Netflix. You know what I'm saying? But that's what happens when you want to, you may be a 1%er, Kate. Hi, Nate. What if we hold pain in shoulders. Woo! Pain in shoulders is 100% associated with zone 4. And usually this is someone who's either holding back giving love to the world or to themselves.